Well, so to start, Alex, not to make you further feel guilty, but I saw this at South by and it made me cry. And I wasn't expecting
Yeah,
to cry over Death of a Unicorn. But when you
yeah,
are writing a movie that is a commentary on the bourgeoisie and the 1%, as well as a father-daughter story, and posing the question, what if unicorns actually did exist? What for you is the most challenging part of making all three of those elements kind of work together in this weird comedy that does really work?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think the challenge is I don't know. It's like the balance of tones, I guess. Like I don't know. I kind of always wanted the movie to have a surprising emotionality to it. Like I kind of wanted it to sneak up on you and to like not know that's where we're going. I think there's a funny thing about unicorns in that like you can't you can't not engage with how absurd they are as like a monster, you know? Like there's something about like the very nature of saying, hey, we're gonna do a unicorn monster movie. It's like, okay, well, that's funny. Like on its face of it, that's a silly thing to do. So you kind of have to engage with comedy. I think you have to engage, if you're gonna engage with comedy in a context of a horror movie, like satire makes a lot of sense. Um, I think, but the challenge was like I didn't want it to be a spoof, like it's like you want it to still have stakes and engagement. And then the last piece of the challenge of like the unicorn movie is like we all have a ton of emotional associations with unicorns. They're really like emotionally fraught with us as not just like me and you, but like society, humanity writ large, Western culture. Like they've always kind of been these symbols of the untamable and the pure and kind of reminders of man's inherent follies and our mistakes and the reasons that we can't like stay on the path that we're supposed to be on and kind of we are let our own foibles and weaknesses get in our own way and destroy the thing that is too good for us, much to our own shame, our great
Yeah.
shame. And in a contemporary context, I think we all have these like really emotional associations with them. And I think as much as I wanted to subvert expectations of what a unicorn movie is, I wanted to satisfy them too in unexpected ways. So that was like kind of the challenge of it is like, how do I say, hey, this isn't the unicorn you think you're getting, and yet like by the end of the movie, you're still gonna get the thing that you wanted. Like I'm not opening with it and I'm not leading with it, but it's gonna be a surprise that we're gonna get there. I feel like honestly balancing the emotional element of it, like it's easy. Just in some ways, it's easier to be funny or be scary but to find poignancy and meaning within that and kind of keep that balance going where you're kind of I don't know, I felt very mindful of like, okay, we're pulling back on the comedy here, we're increasing the scares here, and now like as it moves forward, hopefully the emotional like the relationship at the center of the movie is kind of gaining momentum and gaining a sense of a cumulative power that the valence by the end of it feels like we're actually talking about some shit, you know?
Yeah. When I wanted to talk about the comedy because it was so funny on the carpet for Death of Unicorn at South by, I had no voice. It just went away the first day. So all of my interviews, like you can barely hear what I'm saying. And Will Poulter was so sweet about it and was like, "Good tea, stop talking. Like, don't do it. Don't strain your voice." And then going into the movie 2 seconds after that and watching Will Poulter say some of the most unhinged and funniest lines really just like threw me for a loop. But I wanted to talk specifically about that character because I think I wrote down almost everything he said just because I was like, this is so funny. I'm writing down every single thing this character says. When you have someone that is, kind of the person like Kendall Roy 2.0, but if Kendall Roy was somehow even worse, like, how did you make sure that that character instantly wasn't one of the ones that we were cheering when he died? Because like I did like seeing him do stuff. I didn't want him to die, but then I was like, well, it's the nature of this movie. But like, how did you kind of make that character have more dimensions than I think we've ever really seen with characters like that before?
You know, first of all, Will Poulter is one of the like sweetest, most sincere, generous, like just nice people in the world. And yet when you put him inside an asshole character, he becomes like top three funniest people on the planet. Like I don't care like who else is standing in a room. He's like funnier than them. He's incredible. He's a comic machine. When he just latches into a character, especially when it's so funny is like people who are opposite of him.
Mm.
And I feel like maybe there's like some dark ego, like some part of his id where he's like really like buried all these impulses, and then he gets to like let him out, open Pandora's box and let it rip. Um, I don't know. Shaq was a character whose voice kind of like made sense to me kind of early on in the writing process. And I felt, I don't know, the jokes I'm always like, as someone who writes comedy from time to time, I'm always striving for the jokes that are like funny because of who's saying them, because it's like it implies a whole like psychology and value structure and way of looking at the world that maybe like another character saying it isn't funny, but this person saying it in this context is like, those are the jokes I'm always striving for, is like, what are the things that are just like, oh, this is a voice joke, it's just about the voice of the character. um and that was when Shep was one that just like really kind of immediately was like, it made sense. It's also like a classic, like the third lead of the movie gets to kind of have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
um but I don't know, what was the other question of like how, I don't know what Will found with it that I think is makes the character potent in a way that I hope is effective for people is, it's a heightened character. They're all kind of heightened characters. It's a very theatrical quality to the movie, which is by design. It's intentional, like that's like kind of part of the fun of like the camp ensemble kind of thing. But what I think Will brought to it, and I think, Taya and Richard also brought to their roles, but I think with Will, you kind of get this grounded human vulnerability that I think is really effective in that. The character's absurd, but it's all rooted in the sense of inadequacy and this sense of like wanting to be proven to be smart and to be told he's enough and to be told by his parents they love him and they will never do that. And when his mother gets close to it, he like doesn't really want to hear it because he's kind of bored and concerned and thinking about something else. So I don't know. I think what Will tapped into there was like letting the character be fun, but also and big and theatrical in that way, and yet also being grounded in these very like earnest emotional like psychology at the root of it. And that was something we talked about a lot, was like his relationship to his parents, his desire for approval, his desire to be told, hey, you're enough, you're doing a good job, buddy, and how he was never told that in his life. And so I don't know, I think Will latched into something there that was just made it I don't know. Yeah, I think it makes I feel bad for that character. I'm like, oh man, you've been like, someone did a fucking number on you, man. Like your head's all fucked up. Like there's no fixing it.
Oh, I love him. I was like, the fact that his shorts kept getting shorter, I was like, what is this deal? But I loved him because I like the one that I was like, I don't know when I would ever need this, but I wrote it down, was when he comes out of the room and he's like, what the fuck is going on? I'm grieving in here. I was like, it's genuinely just so funny that that is like his how he functions in this world. But then it works really well because on the flip side, you had Jenna Ortega's character who, she's or what's it called? She's with her father. She's very clearly still in the grieving process herself, unlike Will Poulter, a one-liner. But like she is a girl who leads with compassion, and I think that's what really makes this movie special, is because she is compassion, and even though her dad doesn't want to listen to her, he eventually kind of is like, okay, well, yeah, my daughter's right. Was that kind of the building blocks of where you started with something like this? Or did you kind of find the compassion that those two characters end up having just throughout the writing process?
Yeah, it was always a story about reconciliation between the father and the daughter. That was always like a really big thing of like, you know, kind of being on opposite wavelengths of each other. And she was always like, her superpower was always empathy in my mind, of like, oh yeah, she's an empathetic soul, and art history, that's her other superpower. In the movie. It's like the one, it's like, as a liberal arts major, I was like, hell yeah, we're gonna fucking put one down for the liberal arts. No, that was like a big, but yeah, no, I think that was a big thing, was finding the reconciliation point between them, and his kind of belief that the ends justify the means, and that he can do, which I think is something that we all kind of struggle with in a contemporary social context, of like, moral relativism, like the things that we all do to provide for our loved ones or provide for ourselves. And that sometimes, like, you're like, well, this is how I make a living to provide for my daughter and make sure that if anything comes up, like, if any tragedy should befall us, if any unexpected, I don't know, circumstance should arise, like I've secured enough financial security for us to be okay. And obviously in their character backstory, they have had a tragedy in their past, and the point of that in that context was kind of to really lock Paul's character Elliot into this worldview that, like, a terrible thing has happened to them in the past. The universe kicked him in the teeth, and his kind of defensive reaction formation to that was, I'm going to focus on amassing as much wealth as I can to make sure that I could protect my daughter and make sure that if anything like that happens again, we're going to have enough resources. I'm not going to have to worry about it. And I think that moral relativism is something that she resents ultimately, because there's something, to her, his pursuit of that wealth as a means, which is a means to a positive ends, actually creates a greater problem between them. And I think the movie's kind of him coming to the reconciliation or reconciling with the fact that, the realization that she doesn't want that material shit anyhow. She just wants her dad around. She wants him to recognize, as you said, to lead with empathy and to realize, like, oh, I'm just a person. You're a person. We don't need all of that. We'll get through whatever comes at us together. And I think it comes down to him realizing that if she doesn't need it and she doesn't want it, then why has he been pursuing these things? And maybe it's for his own selfishness, and maybe he just likes material things, which I think sometimes, it's easy to dress up with a veil of honor of, like, I'm doing this for her, when it's like, well, yeah, but like you don't need to drive a sports car for her. Like maybe you just like a sports car, like, and if you recognize that, maybe you can be more honest with yourself. So I think there's something about that hopefully is getting at something that speaks to the modern condition of what it is to kind of exist in our world.
Because it was like one of the reasons it made me cry was like when I was a kid, we had to move, and my dad like upended our entire life because he was trying to keep us where we were because I didn't want to move. And I was like, my guy, in like logically thinking, you had to know that that was not a good idea. But he did it because he was like, well, my daughter doesn't want to move. Let me do all of these dumb things to try and keep us here. And it's like, no, just be the adult and recognize that that's not what I actually need. And so that part really hit with me because I was like, that's just a dude thing, I guess, where they're like, let me think of the dumbest way possible to like save my daughter.
We will do Dudes will do anything but address a problem head on. And yeah, no, no, I mean, I wrote this movie. I mean, I wrote this in the lead up to having a kid myself, and there's definitely a lot of like parental anxiety that like came through of like, man, I hope I don't make these mistakes. I definitely am most conscious of like Ridley is kind of someone who I was, and Elliot is someone who I hope I don't become.
And then I have one last question. So Ridley and Elliot, you just an 80s kid who made a movie and we're like, I'm going to name these characters after iconic 80s characters.
I mean, basically, yeah. Like, I don't know. I was like, you got to name him something. Like, I don't know. I got to start somewhere. It's like, what's one name's as good as another. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Ridley obviously is named after Ridley Scott. Elliot. The funny thing was Elliot is like, yeah, E.T., but also Laura Dern's character in Jurassic Park is named Ellie.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. We can flip that one gender wise. Yeah, there's a few. I don't know. It's like naming characters is hard sometimes. I'm like, all right, good, but it's funny is like you make some of those decisions early on and they just like stick because it's like I don't know, nothing's broken there. But yeah, that was certainly those were ones I was like, yeah, sure, put it on the. I mean, their last name is Kintner also, which is the kid who dies in Jaws, who gets eaten at the end of the first act. Is Alex Kintner, the Kintner boy. So that was where that comes from.
I love that because I'm someone who whenever I write screenplays, I will just like if I'm writing it and it's like a friend group, I just think of my own and like use the letter and then change the name. So all my friends think it's about them. I'm like, no, I needed a name and I thought about you and then thought adjacent to you. So it's just osmosis, the
Yeah,
name.
you just need names sometimes. You're just like, well, what am I watching right now to think about this movie? Great, Ridley Scott. Like, I don't know. I was like, cool. It felt like a good homage, a nice little. It also Ridley feels like a name that I feel like girls have these days, you
Yeah.
know? It's a cool, I think. I don't know. I
It's
hope.
it's very cool. And this movie's really cool. I really appreciate you talking with me today. I love it a lot and I can't wait for everyone else to get to see it.
Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You
Thank
too.
you, Rachel.
Bye. Thank you.